welcome to the double FU, the FU times 2. I am your now much bigger host, Jeremy Schulman at FF Rebel. There's an underscore in the middle there. Next to me here, I'm not let for some reason because I'm dyslexic or I like to read the Talmud. I don't know where I'm going with that, but hey, it's Jesse Moeller at jmoeller05. Fantasy Football Universe in full effect today, and we have the Dynasty roster reviews, round 2 of those. If you sent them to me, we're going to go over them today. One from Jesse as well, who is over there. Jesse, how you doing today?
I am good. It's been a minute since we've been on the screen together, so I'm happy to get back on, chop it up. Last week was interesting, but yeah, ready to. We're in the vicious rookie cycle, making picks, do all that fun stuff. So it's a fun time in the Dynasty Streets, you could say.
Absolutely. We have some, news trickling in. MBS is he definitely in Buffalo, or he's headed to Buffalo? Who knows what's going on? We got some exciting news. Things like maybe Jacoby Brissett will start the entire season. Who knows? But at least during the lull of the offseason here, while we await the all too precious schedule to drop tomorrow, today we'll be doing a little bit of Dynasty roster reviews. You sent them in. We're going to pick through each one of these rosters, determine kind of where you are, whether it's rebuild time or you're ready to compete for a ship, and just see kind of what we would do in these particular scenarios with these teams. So with all of that said, Jesse, are you ready to get started?
Oh, yes, baby. I am ready to roll. Let's do it.
Let's get it done. And if I can figure out how to present what I have on the screen. Did we get it?
Oh, you just got to switch the, yeah.
Oh, that's actually not terrible, but how do I do what I want to do? Hey, all right. We're back here. So as you can see in the bottom right corner, this is sent to us by @NoahBrockway. You have the roster here. So starters on the left in most cases, bench in the middle. Anything related to taxi or picks is on the right here. And you can see with this first roster, Jesse, I think we are clearly in competition mode. What are you thinking?
Yeah, this is very much win now roster. Like, I'm looking at all the pieces they have. There's a glaring need at quarterback. Like, they have Jacobs and a couple guys on the bench, but that QB2 position, aka the super flex spot, like, that's terrifying with how this roster is constructed. And then you look at the draft picks and you see, okay, they had no top 24 picks this year, so it puts them in a very weird spot. But they have a lot of good pieces, like you have Puka, Bijan, Anthony Richardson, that core right there, they're all top 24 picks in startups. Yep. Like, those are all impact assets. And then we kind of move along, and it's like a mix of some old guys with Mixon and Cooper Kupp. But yeah, we kind of break this roster down. What's your takeaway when you look at this roster's overall? Like, what's the one thing that jumps out to you?
Yeah, totally agree with you. Some high-end assets, which is what we want. You mentioned them, Richardson, Bijan, Puka. I also like some of the secondary pieces here in Cooper Kupp, who can go either way, right? He can be kind of a value for you now, or you can look to move him, early in the season or even late in the offseason to a contender. Nico Collins and Jackson Smith and Jigba, 2 young stud wide receivers who I personally value very highly. I know that's a bit of a debate there. So I think it's a good young roster with some pieces, but you also have those win now contending pieces, possibly Gardner Minshew, depending on what happens there. Josh Jacobs is an excellent piece as well. Jacoby Myers could be a serviceable flex, especially with Minshew if they figure that out. But yeah, not a ton of picks here. The rookie draft may have happened because we did get these a couple of weeks ago. If that's the case, Noah, you can let us know here, but we'll go with what we have right now just to let everybody know and to let you know, Jesse, we are working with 4-point passing touchdowns here. So obviously A-Rich getting that huge bump. Rushing, anything else? Let's see. We have tight end premium. So we're half PPR, but an extra point, an extra full point for tight end receptions, an extra half point for wide receiver reception. So it looks like we're working with tiered PPR, 0.5 for running backs, 1 full point for wide receivers, and then 1.5 for tight ends. So given that scoring, does that change your thought process here?
I think it's going to be easier to move those wide receivers to get yourself a quarterback. Like, that's the first thing that jumps out with any type of scoring when it favors like a positional advantage, so tight ends or wide receivers. It doesn't work for running backs in this one, but if it was running backs, like, you kind of use those as more liquid assets to kind of fix your needs because you're pretty set up at wide receiver. You have a decent wide receiver core. Like, the running back room is solid. Like, you have Jacobs as the third option or Connor the third option. So you have those 3. So you're good. What I would do with this is I would start orchestrating to move either like a Nico, maybe a Puka, a JSN, a Jacobs, and I'd package those guys to find myself a QB2 because I'm looking at whatever player like you put as your super flex QB2 spot, you're going to be getting like negative points against a weekly starting quarterback. Like that's just how it works out. So, and looking at the roster, like they have Joe Flacco, Gardner Minshew, Dobbs. They can roll with Minshew, but like how long is Minshew going to start, right? Like you have no security with him, right? So I would go try to find that older vet where it's like a Stafford, a Cousins, one of those guys, Aaron Rodgers, maybe. Get them so you have someone like they're not replacing that guy this year unless it's an injury or something of that nature. Because as fun as Minshew's contract is, if he sucks, they'll just go back to Aiden O'Connell. He's just never been that good. So I don't view Minshew in that tier of quarterback. So I would be trying my way to move up. Or if you want to tier up all the way to a really good quarterback, then move one of your high end pieces, like move Puka, move Nico, one of those guys. Find a way to package them into a deal. So that would be my first starting point. I would be curious to see if they did make rookie picks where they ended up, because that 309 through 312 range, there's a lot of good like running back / wide receivers that fall there. So like you're probably feeling good about your roster for that point. But yeah, that would be my first focal point this offseason. I would just be inundating all my other teammates in that league. I'd be like, I need a quarterback. I see you have depth. Like give me one of your quarterbacks. Let's make this happen. And I would even move Bijan like for an elite quarterback. I would make that happen if I had to. So I would find a way to do that, because if you ended up getting Kyler on this roster instead of Bijan, you'll like this roster 100 times more. Like you will not have question marks. You will just feel great about it, and you just don't have to worry about it. So that would be my main goal with this team.
Yeah. And Noah is self-aware. The last thing that he wrote to me was any tips for getting a QB2 here would be greatly appreciated. So he knows this is a 12-teamer, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that. So certainly different than if we're looking at 10 teams here. I worry about moving Bijan because I want those elite assets if I'm really going to compete. If you look at his running back room, right, and that's kind of where I like to start when I'm looking at potential competing teams. We have Bijan, right? High-end asset. We have James Conner, serviceable RB2 for this season. We have Joe Mixon, serviceable back-end RB2 for this season. And we have Josh Jacobs. Between those three guys with Bijan, I think you can cobble together an RB2 and potentially a weekly flex. And then if Nico Collins or Jackson Smith and Jigba break out, if Puka and Kupp round into form. But I'm also noticing as I'm discussing this that I'm inserting a lot of ifs and conditional statements in here, right? So that to me lets me know that I think I want to go ahead and kind of punt 2024 more or less and move to 2025. Now, that means that there's a ton of moves that need to be made. We need to look at the older guys in this roster. It's Connor, it's Jacobs, it's Mixon, it's Kupp, all right? Yes. And it's potentially Kittle. There's 5 guys right here that you could move today to make sure that you are, insulated enough for 2025. Now, you can move them for picks. You can move them for younger players. Unfortunately, you have 2 of the better younger players in Nico and Jackson to trade for, who are a bit undervalued as wide receivers. But this might be a good opportunity to go inquire about Jordan Love. Some people still aren't sold. I'm absolutely sold on Jordan Love. Like you mentioned, Kyler Murray, people are going to want to see it again before they buy in. And he's going to have, I think Kyler's 26 years old still, maybe 27. He's still got
he's still
a long way to go, right? So, what I would do is probably punt 2024. I'm assuming the rookie draft has happened. If not, you can move those 2024 pieces, those 3rd round picks, and trade for a 2025 3rd rounder and just try and kind of pick up more pieces as well that way. So there's lots of options here. Even a Jacoby Myers, I'm happy to move for a 3rd, Josh Downs, those types of guys. But totally agree with you. I want to go for, another elite quarterback. I want to sit on this roster for a year, build with youth, and try and upgrade on some talent where I can. Now, if that's the route that we're going to go, Jesse, potentially here, who's the first guy you're looking at where you're saying, like, right now, I can move this guy for maybe and a pick, whatever, for an elite asset, maybe a 2-for-1 deal? Who are you trying to move off of right now, and who might you target?
So if we're trying to get younger, what I'm trying to do is because they have their 25 first, right? So if you're trying to actually tear it down into that way, it is a tricky proposition. But I'm going to get injured players or guys who are dealing with suspension. So it's going to sound ugly, but I'm going to go target Hawkinson at the position. I'm going to say, like, here, take Kittle. See if I can do a 1-for-1 swap, because worried about Hawkinson. If they're not, maybe add a little necessary one of my back end pieces that I'm not worried about playing this year. Do that. I would look to tearing down a bunch of these guys, like Nico, tear down from him. I would just pivot off of JSN and see what I can get for him and move him into a package of players. It might sound rough with Bijan, but I'm moving Bijan into a wide receiver. Like I'm just getting off. If I'm not worried about competing this year and going 25, there's a ton of running backs next year. Like, and if you tear down, I'm going to go find a high-end wide receiver similar to Puka in that range. I'll just flip them to a team that needs a running back. Like you could probably make that happen relatively easily. So I would look to just move it out of a bunch of that. And then Cup, Mixon, and Jacobs, all these older assets, I'm just moving them for picks or similar valued players. Just go to the website like Dynasty.lab, find guys who are similarly valued, do a 1-for-1 swap. If you want to add like pieces onto a second, go down a little bit, a tier or two. Like it's an easy way to do it so that it's a lot less work on your end. So you don't have to like look through teams to do that. Just go. I would just make the moves. Just start it now. Because if you do it now, you'll have an advantage over the rest of your league.
Exactly.
And teams won't know what's going on until it's too late. They'll be like, oh, shoot, they're punting, right? So if you want to do that, you want to get the leg up on 2025 and getting that early first, that's how you go about doing it. You start it now. It sucks because you're not going to compete this year if you go that route, but you get the advantage and then you go from there. So if you want to go that route, yeah. So Marvin Harris Jr. 101 in our Dynasty League, which we'll talk about.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much.
But yeah, like it's pretty easy to do that. The only guys I really want to hold on my 2025 team, I'm holding Richardson. I'm holding Puka. The rest of the guys are gone. Like I'll move anybody else on this team because I don't care about running backs if I'm not trying to compete because running backs are win now assets. As great as Bijan is, another year into it, like the way that these work is the dynasty shine on him starts to wear off after a couple of years, right? We see this with Jonathan Taylor. We see this with Christian McCaffrey over the years. Like the shine starts to wear off. And I get it, will be in year 3, but it will start happening slowly but surely. People will be like, ooh, the 2025 RB1, is he up there with Bijan? Like this will happen next year. This is how this goes with running back. So yeah. And what Aaron's talking about right here, like stockpiling rookie picks is that's what we did in our Dynasty League. And by the way, it fucking works. So people should do it because it pisses people off. This is why. So I'm going to pivot for a second. In our Dynasty League that we did, I literally just tanked out the game. I was like, nope, I'm absolutely tanking this team. So I got a couple assets, and it's like all the picks through the top 3 rounds. I was like, I don't care, man. Like, we're not trying to win. And it pissed the league off, but I was like, whatever, man, it's in the rules, so I could do it. So yeah, like start early if you're going to do it. Because you don't want to get into week 4, week 5. You're 2 and 3, you're 1 and 4, and you're like, crap, this team sucks. It's a lot harder to sell those pieces off. You can still sell them off in season, the older guys, but the younger guys, it's just harder to do. So if you do it now, you get a massive advantage. And then if like Minshew's another guy, like I'm getting him off the roster. Anybody want to I would do Minshew plus a 3 to give me any second. I'm sending him that way. Like I'm just tearing it down if we go that route. Personally, I think you could compete with this roster, so I don't think I'm going to go that route. About if you like what Jeremy's talking about pivoting, like that's what you do, and you start just doing it now, and then it's snowball effect, and then teams will start coming to pick off your assets too because they'll see a fire sales going on, and then you have it all right because you don't have to sell right now, but you find the right deal you're comfortable with, just move those guys up, and then you look in a couple months, your stockpile of young players and picks, and you're like, all right, 2025, like that's the destination. So yeah, and you just go from there.
Yep, 100%. And just to add to that point of starting now, if you start now and you're able to sell off a few big pieces, you already have a direction before anyone else in your league has a direction, and you've let that league know that you are selling, right? So you go into the season knowing that you're not going to compete in 2024. You build yourself and your roster for 2025 and beyond. And you're going to be selling some of these older guys when they hit. Josh Jacobs has a great first 2 weeks of the season, and everyone's like, Josh Jacobs is back. The move worked to Green Bay. Sell that man for a first, right? Because you're already in sell mode. You know what's going on. And that's only going to benefit you moving forward. So NoahBrockway, good luck with this. Let us know how it goes in your search for QB2 and your pursuit of a ship in 2025. Moving on, next we have at Luke Sinclair 19 on Twitter. Again, here you see his roster. Let me just pull up a few pieces of vital information if I have any. It's a 12-team Superflex PPR with a 0.25 tight end premium. The startup was just last year, so this is what we're looking at. You see the picks that he has already amassed.
This team punted for sure.
Exactly. It's a first-year punt. Love that strategy. Again, as Jesse was just saying, we both took kind of the same approach there. And that's why Caleb Williams at 102 came to me. And I'm very excited about that. Jesse, what are you thinking here of this team? It is a punt, but how are we looking potentially with these picks? And then beyond with 1, 2, 3, 4 first rounders and 1, 2, 3 second rounders next year.
Yeah, I'm just accumulating assets on the team. The way that this team looks, I'm assuming Jamario Douglas fell to like a stupid value, so they picked them. You can kind of tell that's how it did, because otherwise it doesn't really serve him any purpose, because he's a guy that gives you points, not value. So like I did this in our league too. It was like round 18 and there was literally nobody. And I was like, all right, fine, I'll take this veteran, because you can do that sometimes. But you look at their roster, they got Herbert, they have Waddle, they have McBride, they have Laporta, they have Kyle Pitts, and possibly Bryce Young. So with this roster and that 102 position, right, it depends who comes to you. Well, I've seen Marvin Harrison Jr. get pushed to 101. So Caleb Williams 102, you think you. Otherwise, you take Marvin Harrison Jr. You can go that with your rookie. It doesn't really matter whoever you get there. You're getting a high-end top 24 startup pick out of the gate, no matter what, with the 102. And then with the 111, the 202, the 209, I'm just taking whoever falls in that range. So we've seen a lot of like the quarterbacks. If you want another quarterback, you could take a Nix, you could take a Penix, you could take the rookie. Maybe Brooks goes there if you want to take Brooks because he's so young. I'm okay with him on a punt. But realistically, like you're probably just looking at wide receivers in that range. So you just stockpile the wide receivers, the 111, 202, and you just slowly just build this team out and you kind of watch it rise. Because you have, I would say, 4, 5 high-end assets, including Kyle Pitts, if you want to include Kyle Pitts. If not, you have 4. You have like 4 certified assets where you know the value is going to stay insulated through next year. Like Herbert is going to stay, McBride's going to stay, Lord Porter is going to stay. Waddle should stay. Like those guys, like they're kind of not going to drop off much. I'd say Pitts is a little bit more iffy, but we'll say, because people are talking about him possibly being the tight end in Dynasty 1 again, like he could be in that conversation too. And then if Bryce Young hits, it comes a lot better. But if he falters, really doesn't matter because you have picks for this year. You have 4 next year. So worst case, you just recycle the quarterback position. And if you have the quarterback at 102, like you move there. So I would be very curious to see how this rookie draft wins, because it would shape my view on this team a lot more. But I'm selling Warren. Like Warren still has value. I'm getting him off my roster immediately. Like you're not competing with this team. Like you have too many holes to compete. So Warren, sell somebody for a second. I don't care if it's 26 second, whatever it is, just get him out. Like, or you can move him for a wide receiver symbol. You go that. And then you look at the back end, it's got Mims, Burks, Dotson. There's a couple interesting dart throws in there. So maybe one of those guys hits along with Demario Douglas. You package them, you make that work. Like you just, you can find ways to keep moving and you just keep going that direction. But it's off to a great start, I would say. Like I like the way this team looks, where it's at. And I know people clown on Twitter. They're always like, oh, these guys love punting and doing that. And I'm like, yeah, because it freaking works. Like, this is why we like doing this. This is what happens. What happens, like, with the rookie draft season? Everyone is hyped for these rookie picks, right? So, like, you have all these rookie picks, and they will have this next year. People will be coming and making them Godfather offers for those picks. Yep. So don't sell those picks unless you're getting highly valued inside assets. Like, if someone comes and, like, offers you – actually, SC had an interesting comment about Bijan a little bit ago, which this one right here, right? Yep. If someone offers you Bijan for like an early first next year, sure, you can take that pick if you want. On the flip side, yeah, like I'm not. If someone gave me that offer on a pretender, like I would sell Bijan for that price. I'd be fine doing that. You just have to know the teams that you're getting the picks from. Are they good teams or are they bad teams? If it's like late first, not really interested in it. If it's early first, yeah, like I would be much more interested in that. So like no, you kind of have to do a little bit of scouting and look at the teams. Like if it's a team like this that's offering me a first, absolutely, I'd be like, yeah, let me get those first, right? If it's a good contending team, maybe not. So know the teams, but yeah, 100% with you on that. What with this roster, which guys are you looking to move off of, or are there any like young assets you'd be looking to acquire on this team?
I don't know. Bryce Young, I think, is very iffy as my QB2. I think I'm hoping for at least a couple of weeks of a starter role for Sam Darnold, so I can move him. If he's named the week 1 starter, I'm moving him as soon as possible. Move him to the JJ manager. That should be easy. And you can move him elsewhere if that works for you. Otherwise, any of those wide receivers who get any sort of hype, Bateman, it's once again Rashad Bateman and Jahan Dotson season. I don't know how we got here, but like if anyone will take those guys for a late second, an early third, I'd probably flip them as well. Like you said, Mims or Douglas, that's great. But looking at this roster, because I'm not competing probably this year, I'm looking to, if I'm looking at my picks, I'm loading up for 2025. It's possible that in season you can sell some of those 2025 picks for guys to compete But really, I'm probably playing for 2025, in which case these 3 tight ends are probably at their peak value. I'm selling one of them. It's probably going to be Trey McBride. We know Jared Goff just got locked into Detroit. We know Kyle Pitts is well insulated with his tight end, or sorry, with his quarterback play because of what just happened this offseason in Atlanta. Trey McBride, with how bad that team is, the fact that MHJ is coming in, the fact that they may add, I'm looking to move off of him, of those 3 guys, because I think his value is higher than Pitts, but it may not be. There's more volatility there. It may not be for long, depending on what happens in Arizona. So I'm looking to move McBride. I'll keep those other 2 tight ends. I'm looking to move, like you said, Jacoby Myers potentially. Quentin Johnston is a good guy to move if he's getting hype. He looks great in camp. He's the clear number 2 or number 1, or whatever. And Jalen Warren's a great one as well. So yeah, I'm keeping Herbert. I'm probably keeping Young. I'm looking to add a 3rd quarterback as well and playing for 2025.
Yeah, I would. Of those tight ends that they have a ton of tight ends, right? So like Laporta is significantly overvalued over all these other guys, and personally, I don't understand like why he is that highly valued. It should be like they should all be kind of clustered together. They're really not. Like Laporta is going around 2, McBride's pushed into late round 3, and then it's like Pitts and all those guys. Yeah. So just decide which of the tight ends you want to sell. Like I'm with Jeremy on this one. Pick a tight end. Just don't sell a guy just because we tell you to sell a guy. Pick the guy that you want to sell that. Sure. They're all kind of similarly valued. Personally, Laporta is the guy just because he's valued at the tight end 1. So I'll move him off because I don't see how he gains value from that position. Like that's where I'm coming at it. But yeah, you can pick McBride, you can pick Pitts, any one of those guys if you want to sell, because yeah, you're stocked and you don't need all of these tight ends unless it's a severe like heavy tight end premium where these guys you could flex them out and do that. I don't think that's in the scoring. So yeah, I'm fine moving one of them for sure. And you could like pivot into a wide receiver because this wide receiver room outside of Waddle is, needless to say, pretty gross. So we'll see what happens from there. But if you could do that, then yeah, like go get a high-end wide receiver. I'd love that because those are safer building block assets than the tight ends. Like that's just kind of how it works for the nice.
And just a question here from SC, right? Let's just take a look at the draft pick. So 102, let's assume Marvin Harrison. Why not? So 111, if Brooks is there, do you take Brooks, especially if we're looking to play for 2025 and kind of let him recover, let him learn the system, and all systems go for him in season 2 as your RB1 here on this team? Or are you looking to take someone like Worthy or Ladd McConkey to just really flesh out that wide receiver room? Because in 2025, with those 4 picks, as you mentioned, there's going to be a ton of running backs available.
Yeah, I don't want Ladd. Ladd's the one piece on a contender. Like if you're looking to contend year like this year, like Ladd's the guy I would take. Personally, I'm going to go after Worthy or BTJ, whichever you prefer. I think Worthy has an upside shot. BTJ is the upside shot as well. Where they have longer term value. I don't think Ladd is as insulated as those guys. Like he's getting significantly propped up by the position more than the other one. Worthy seems to be the guy that goes above this range. So I don't think you're going to get Worthy personally. If Worthy falls to it, I'm fine with him or BTJ. Like I found myself ending up with a lot of BTJ in this range because for some reason Worthy gets pushed above. Brooks usually goes above this as well. And as a pretender, I really don't think I need to invest in Brooks. You can. He's only 20 years old. Like he's super young, so he can wait it out and you can be fine. But realistically, I'd rather just get the wide receiver because that running back class is very good. It is coming. It is strong. So we're going to get a lot of running backs in this range next year between probably the 106 and the 112. There'll be like 2 or 3 of those guys where you can just draft them next year and you'll probably get similar, if not better production. So yeah, I'm fine going to pick whichever wide receiver. Is there a particular wide receiver you prefer that group? I think it's Worthy, right?
Oh yeah, it's Worthy. If Worthy's at 111, forget it. He's my clear 109. I wouldn't hate him at 108, but I haven't done that yet. Haven't been that brave. I think the top 8 are still pretty much locked with JJ in there. But yeah, Worthy's my 109. Brooks is my 110, and I haven't deviated from that at all. So we're pretty set there. Yeah, and lastly, I think you're already well set up for 2025. If for some reason you made some great picks, you find yourself competing in 2024, Bryce Young becomes an absolute monster. All the tight ends are cruising. I don't know. Tyreek Hill goes down for the year and Jalen Waddle is the clear number 1. Right. If all of those things happen and you're in a really good position, you're sitting at 5-2, 6-2, I would consider moving some of my 2025 picks to compete this year to be a high end, to give myself a good chance at a championship with a couple of high-end pieces here, but that's a bit more risky. You'll have to weigh that one out. Good thing is you don't have to do anything right now. You can just sit back and see what happens.
Yeah, I would say just make sure you look at your max points for. Like that is extremely crucial on contenders because there's teams that are 6-2 and they're like 9th in max points for, and those are what we call paper tigers, and those are the teams I attack there first because those are the first you want. So just be careful if you're going to contender mode. Make sure you know how your team is. You have the depth to do it because like I could see this roster turning into a paper tiger where it's like, oh yeah, like we're competitive, we're being really good, but you have no depth, and like something changes in season, all of a sudden you slowly just shit the bed. And so like just be careful if you're contending with a roster. You need a lot of these picks from this year to hit. So like if that's the case, then yeah, you can do it. But just just be wary with this roster because realistically, this thing's like a 25, 26 contender.
Yep. Okay. Avert your eyes because we have some psychopaths who like to have theirs in light mode. So we have a few of those. Here it comes. 3, 2, 1. Watch out. Okay.
What are
this
we doing
not
here?
so terrible, especially because the first thing that I saw was Patrick Mahomes. You have Patrick Mahomes on your team. Congratulations. Not congratulations for whatever league this is. It's not a sleeper league. I'll tell you that much.
Wait. This is a start 8 or 6. It's start 8, 1 QB. What the hell is this?
It's definitely 1 QB. I'll give you the information when I can figure it out here in a second. But Jesse, why don't you talk a little bit about the roster as you see it? It also looks like the kickers and defense are listed on the right. We don't really need to go too in depth on that.
Okay.
It looks like good pieces on the bench as well. What do we got?
Yeah, this is a contender. Like you see this immediately. You can tell it's a contender. You have Mahomes, whatever. Say he's not QB1, he's QB2, he's QB whatever. He's a high-end elite quarterback. That's fine.
Okay.
You have Jonathan Taylor, high-end running back. You have Travis Etienne, top 8 dynasty running back. Now you have Saquon Barkley, another high-end running back. So you're stocked there with the running back room. Yep. Wide receivers, you have AJ Brown, you have Brandon Ayuk, you have Mike Evans. Oh yeah, you have Devontae Adams on the bench as well. Amari Cooper. You also have Kyle Pitts, so you're gonna be starting Kyle Pitts over Dallas Goedert. Like realistically, this team's a contender. What I'm curious about is their picks. Do they have any picks? Because I don't see any picks on the screen. That's what I'm more curious about. Is their pick situation?
Yeah, I'm not giving any information about picks, but roster size is there. It's half PPR. It's 4 points per passing touchdown, so a couple of knocks already on this roster, although the running backs are pretty excellent. So, yeah, passing is standard, and then it's, standard everything else. So standard except for half PPR and 4 point passing touchdowns. I like the bench here. The bench to me screams kind of insane depth, which is what I want when I'm with a contender. At the same time, I'm looking to move some of that depth, probably get younger, especially with Godwin and Cooper. Those are two guys that I'm probably moving immediately. I'm also finding a way to play Devontae Adams. So I might be kind of moving Mike Evans for some pieces and just plug Devontae Adams in there. For me, that's a 1-for-1 replacement. And since we're 1 QB, if anybody values Baker Mayfield or whoever's down here, Deshaun Watson, right? I'm happy to kind of move those guys. But like Jesse said, we don't have any of the pick information here, but we can tell you that this team is an absolute contender. I'm kind of taking Kyle Pitts and inserting him into the lineup over Dallas Goedert. Goedert is somebody I'd look to move if anybody wants him. But yeah, accumulating those picks and really like the depth here at running back, especially with Rico Dowdle, who I think will be a serviceable high-end RB3, potential back-end RB2. And then, I'd probably go out and get more running back depth, to be fair, on this roster. If I can move some of those receivers like Cooper or Godwin and get like I don't know, depending on what I'm looking at. I'm trying to think of a guy that's like Devin Singletary in terms of age and situation, but not Devin Singletary.
Yeah, so if you're looking for running backs in the Amari Cooper range, you're talking about Najee Harris. Like Derrick Henry's a little old, DeAndre Swift, Mixon, like those type of guys. So if you want to go for Najee Harris, like I think Najee Harris actually helps you more. What I would do actually is I would take Saquon, and I know this sounds awful. I'm moving him for like Brooks or somebody like that. I'm tearing down off of him because you have Taylor, you have ETN. You're pretty set. I would pivot him into getting younger because he holds a lot of cachet. I don't really want to move Taylor because he's young enough and still good. Barkley's the one guy, or like you talked about with Evans. I'm taking some of these older assets and I'm pivoting them into a little bit younger because you have the depth where you can lose those guys. It's not going to hurt you. And you pivot them into younger pieces and like you slowly just recycle this dynasty. And this is how you stay a contender for theoretically ever. Like you repackage them older guys into younger, like a team that needs it go find that team. Like, all right, give me your first or whatever, and then you go get like I just continue the cycle of Dynasty because that's how this team stays contender for as long as possible. So pick a couple of your wide receivers. If you want to use Ayuk because he's super value, like you could do that. You could do ETN. He's another guy. If you wanted to package off AJ Brown, I know this sounds like blasphemy talking about AJ Brown. It's really hard. He's starting to get up there in age. So if you want to have that conversation with him, I'm fine just keeping rostering him. But picking a couple of these guys and just twisting the needle to get a little bit younger, I think is how you stay this perennial contender team, because this team's the top probably 3 or 4 at like team in the league at worst. Like, I find it hard to believe that there's that many teams that are that much better than them because they have a lot of good assets. Yeah.
And also now is the time to trade for picks. So it moves that I'm interested in. Let's take, for example, Saquon, right? Let's say right now you can get a first and a second round pick in 2025 for Saquon Barkley. Make that move. And then as the season approaches, you have a first and a second round pick that you can use to acquire guys either late in the offseason or as the season unfolds. Your depth is so strong. You can plug someone in there for Saquon, get 90, Adams will give you 90%, maybe 85% Saquon production and half PPR. And then, if you're really contending, you're as good as you are, you can take those picks and use them to, get healthy running backs to kind of supplement the rest of this roster in season. So if there are guys that you're looking to move, especially with this depth, move them for picks now, use those picks later if need be, because you never know what's going to happen. Barkley could absolutely crush, or you get injured week 3, and then this team is destroyed. Insulate yourself with more picks.
Yeah, like you're good enough for if you piece off like 2 or 3 of these guys, you're going to be fine. Because you have Cooper, you have Devontae Adams, you have Kyle Pitts at that end, right? Just be careful of how far you tier down with these guys if you're finding replaceable assets, because if they give you 80 to 90%, you're going to lose maybe 2-3 points per game. If you're going a little bit farther down than that, you better be getting high-end premium picks because you will hurt yourself. The thing about these low-scoring leagues is 8 starting spots is you need high-end pieces in these leagues. So if you're going to get the Chris Godwins of the world, like you're kind of losing it. So just be careful. Like, I think Devontae Adams gives you a much better shot than I do Amari Cooper or Godwin or those guys. So like you want the still high-end older assets. So just be careful on how far you tier down with these teams, because all of a sudden you look at it, you're like, ooh, that was a mistake.
Yep. Sorry about the misprint here. TNFFAuctionJoe. Appreciate the roster and good luck to you in the season. The next one is also a light mode psychopath. And for this particular one, he sent it to me in a really nice way, but I wasn't able to screenshot it in a really nice way. So this is what we're ended up with. Let's see. Do we have a super? It doesn't look like we have Superflex, but oh, yes, we do. I will double check the settings on this with what we were given. But it looks like we have some high-end pieces. Jesse, just initially, what are you thinking? We contending or are we pretending here?
Well, yeah, it says flex, but Baker Mayfield's in the flex. So I don't, maybe this is a weird light mode thing. As you can tell, I don't play any of my sleeper leagues in light mode. So I'm struggling because usually the super flex spot is colored differently. So I'm confused as to why it has Baker Mayfield in the flex. That's just the whole, my like OCD is just bothering me about this. But anyways, leave that alone. Like, yeah, you got Lamar, you have Saquon, you have Jacobs, you're set up there. Your wide receiver room is good. You have Waddle, you have the guys that are more valued for their actual dynasty value than they production wise. So it's really good. And then, I mean, you have Pacheco, you have Kamara, you have Ingram. So I'm assuming maybe there's some tight end premium scoring to this league, because I don't know why you'd be flexing.
0.5.
Okay. Yeah. So that makes sense. Yeah. You can flex him. I do worry about the depth on this roster. Like, I'm looking at the bench and I'm like, I mean, Thielen, good luck reproducing what he did last year. Like, he's probably just going to be a guy that's going to sit on your bench to waste away. You have Jerry Jeudy, you have Henry. Like, it gets pretty thin on this roster. So hopefully there are some picks on this roster. Oh, they have Bucky Irving on their taxi squad. So that means they already had their rookie draft. And they had no picks. So this squad worries me a little bit, because you're going to get old really fast with this roster without the picks, and you're going to start realizing like the dynasty value is going to erode where you need those guys to contend. I have a hard time seeing Evan Ingram reproduce what he did last year. Last year seemed like his peak. I think you're good with Pacheco. And the whole Baker Mayfield is QB2. It's fine if you have him that, but what you need is more high-end assets to supplement a Baker Mayfield at QB2, because if you have Baker Mayfield as your QB2, you're going to be losing at that super flex spot. That's just how it works. So you need a couple more high-end assets. So like I feel like this team's kind of in between. Like they're good. They have a few high-end assets. It's very like they're very what is the word I'm looking for? They're thin on depth. So you kind of need to find a way to get your roster a little bit better. And if that's more than likely piecing down off your high-end guys.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to need to do because I have a little bit more info here. I didn't include. We're in trouble in draft pick land. We have 4 rounds of the rookie draft. 2025, we only have a second round pick. So this is kind of what we're looking at here. We're really going to have to make moves here to acquire more picks or to get younger. Is there anything you see in that regard? I see, listen, I don't have the info, but let's assume it's a super flex here with Baker Mayfield in the flex. Let's also a point to note it's 6-point passing touchdowns. So Lamar slightly less valuable in this case. I do see Geno Smith on the bench. What do you want to do for maybe QB2 or just to, get Alvin Kamara and Josh Jacobs and Adam Thielen and Cortland Sutton and turn these guys into younger guys?
Yeah, I'm selling Baker Mayfield in this roster. You have Geno Smith. There's not going to be a production difference between the two of these guys. The only thing is Baker's younger and he has that contract. So I'm using that I'm trying to get Baker off of my roster because Baker's kind of in that QB 20 range. And it's like, why is he going over these other? And this is also the Jared Goff at QB 15 range. And Dynasty, like both these guys, they're not really going to gain any more value. Like they're kind of there. Good luck for them to get higher because they both had really good seasons last year. So I'm taking these guys and I'm either pivoting down or I'm putting them into picks because these picks are going to hold value. So like Baker, I'm going to tear down off of Baker and like get a second plus a lesser asset. If you want to get like a flex level, like wide receiver 3 at a second for Baker, you could totally do that. I would also look into, you have Jacobs, you have Barkley, you have like Pacheco and Kamara. You don't need all of these guys. Yeah. So I'm finding that, and it's going to be Barkley or it's going to be Jacobs. I'm piecing those guys down. And I'm giving yourself more depth because there's 4 flex spots. So you don't need the high-end guys as much in this league. But what's weird about it is like it's not a super like heavy roster, the construction. So it's kind of an interesting league the way this is built out. So yeah, I'm trying to find a way to piece down to give myself picks to stay a little bit younger so I can continue this. Because what's going to happen with this team in particular, you're going to look next year and people are going to look at this roster and be like, oh, yuck. Like this is really old. There's not a lot of pieces. Like they have Lamar, they have Waddle. Saquon's a year older. Jacobs is a year older. You have Ayuk as well. So you have like 3 guys. Kittle's old. So age is coming for this roster. So you need to be out in front of it while you still have a chance with a couple of guys with value because without the picks, like this is the problem that happens. Like you look at your roster and you're like, I'm screwed. Like I just got the old producers. The problem is like Baker at QB2, you need to find ways to make up for your roster. And Kamara, like I don't think you get that with Ingram. Really, I don't think you get that with Kamara. Pacheco, you could have. I would rather probably start Pacheco over like Jacobs to tell you the truth. Like I would just have more confidence in him. So I would move either Barkley or Jacobs. Pick which one of those guys and sell them. Same thing with it. Yeah, you just got to do what we talked about the last team. Same thing.
Yeah, and one thing that I'm thinking about here is we just had our Dynasty startup. Tight end, I missed out on a very early run. It was too early for me. I ended up picking up Evan Ingram and George Kittle at values relative to where I thought they should go. However, now I'm left with Evan Ingram and George Kittle as my starting tight ends and guys who have to piece from. And like you're saying, in a year, definitely in 2 years, that's going to look a lot less desirable. So, you're going to need to figure out what to do with these guys now. It looks like tight end, it looks like running back are your 2 main places where you need to figure out how do I pivot off of them, get to younger players, and accumulate draft picks as well, because that's something that this team is certainly lacking. Let's move on to we got 2 teams left. This is another team here. Jesse, why don't you talk a little bit about what we're looking at, because it looks like we're looking at a rebuild. What are you thinking about this squad? And we got some. Oh, I have the bench in front of the starter. So
yeah, no, it's all good. I was like, it's in dark mode. So salute to you for being a hero to keep in dark mode. I appreciate this. I immediately like your roster better just for that reason. But no, on a serious note, this team is solid. Like you have a couple pieces, but like realistically, you look at this roster, you have Tank Dell and Zay Flowers. That's your wide receiver 1. That's your wide receiver 2. Like that's not great. Like it's fine for dynasty value, but like production wise, Tank Dell's in a crowded room. Zay Flowers, I like him a lot, but he was not that great of a dynasty asset. So you need him to take a significant leap. With Dallas Goedert in your flex, Joshua Palmer in your flex, Mike Williams in your flex, what that tells you is this team is nowhere near me competing because you're going to get absolutely murked in the flex spots. Like Palmer, Williams. Yeah, go ahead.
Quick note. So we're looking at 1 QB. Those 2024 picks, those are picks 5, 6, and 7. So that changes things a little bit, right?
Yeah, and 1 QB, these are like back end first. So what you're doing is you're basically getting the wide receiver. Like this is the Xavier Worthy. This is like we talk about with BTJ, Lad. Just take whoever falls there. If you could trade up into the elite assets, like if I could move one of those first plus any one of my guys, which I don't know who you're really adding on there, you basically would have to like add on Zay Flowers. Are you confident enough to do that? Because what you're doing in that situation is you're getting more premium assets, but you're still not really competing because you're losing a spot, right? So yeah, like I'd be fine just sitting and picking at the wide receiver range if whoever falls there. If you want it, and if Brooks falls to you, you take Brooks. That solves your running back problem significantly because you're going from Ty Chandler to Brooks. So if you get like you have 5, 6, 7, right? So you can take the running back, back-to-back wide receivers. You could do that and you'd be set. If he doesn't go, just hammer wide receivers. Don't even force it. With the quarterbacks, you have Cousins and Mayfield. It's kind of the same thing, right? I much prefer Cousins. He's been a QB1 like 6 of the last 8 years in points rate. Like that's what he does. This is what Kirk Cousins does. He's undervalued, so I like him.
Yep.
But yeah, the depth is severely lacking. What's nice is you have all of these picks, so that should help insulate the depth a little bit. So I would be very curious to see what those first turn into. That would make me feel a little bit better about this roster. But don't force yourself into competing with this roster. Breece Hall is he's young. Flowers is young. Dell's young. Laporta's young. Outside of that, like you really don't have much else.
Jesse, let's assume 5, 6, 7 for a second. So probably Worthy, Brooks, and BTJ.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
So whatever you want to put there.
Yeah, let's assume those guys, and let's assume in the second we get a running back, whether it's let's assume it's Benson, maybe it's Corum. How are you feeling about this team now?
I feel okay. I still don't think I'm a contender. Like I would looking at this roster and seeing like how much of a deficit you have to make up with a few of these spots, like it would be those guys all have to hit big, kind of like we had with the 2022 class where those guys hit way over what their expected draft capital was, right? Where you have those guys come in and they just stormed out the gate, like we kind of what we did with Tank Dell last year on this team, right? Like you got to take Dell, you weren't expecting anything. Holy smokes, he's a really good asset. So if that happens with this roster, then you could kind of think about competing. The one thing I'm looking at is they don't really have any extra first in 2025. They have an extra second.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see where it happens. This team feels like it's on the upward trajectory, but still like it's a year or two out with this roster. So I would probably move Dallas Goedert to a team that needs a tight end. And I know with Goddard's in a really weird range in Dynasty because people don't really want him. Yeah, like he's in the kind of like I have him. No one really wants him. So it's like he's more or less kind of a throw in deals, which I know sucks for him, but that's just kind of where he is in Dynasty. So yeah, like I don't really know what I'm doing with this team, to tell the truth. I would probably play this offseason out where I would just kind of sit and see where the rest of my market is in my league. And then I would maybe either piece down and probably just go get more assets like the 2025 first. I don't know if I really want to go on all of this roster because I don't know if it's going to turn them into contender or not. Like you have Breece Hall, you have Laporta. Outside of that, like you don't have any high-end assets. So you're losing the quarterback battle. Like Cousins is great, but he's not going to be a top 5 quarterback. Like that's just not what he's going to be. The wide receiver room and your flexes. So I'd be curious to hear what you would do with this roster because I'm actually not sure what I do.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Dallas Goedert has got to go. I don't care for what price, but you know, I got to get him off this roster and see if anyone will value him for a late second or early third. Even in 2025, if my 2024 draft hasn't happened, that's a good thing to do. But yeah, we have Kendre Miller, we have Zach Charbonnet. I like those guys as kind of longer term plays. But I agree with you. Roshan Johnson also not terrible, but I agree with you. There's going to have to be a lot to go right for these guys for them to actually hit. That happens with running back all the time. We just have no idea who those running backs are going to be and what opportunity is going to open up. So I agree with you. One question here from Austin. This is at @Perkle1 on Twitter. He asked us, in terms of his 5, 6, 7, are you going to take one of those picks and go after Caleb Williams in 1 QB? Or my thought here, I'll wait till kind of the mid-second round and potentially grab Cousins' successor in Michael Penix. What are you thinking about quarterback here? You have just Kirk and Baker. Do you want to go after Caleb here and solidify that position in 1 QB, or does it just not matter that much?
So 1 QB, I want the rushing asset more. Like the way one quarterback leagues work is the market still, even for like a Caleb or one of those guys, the market's still really not there. Like you're never going to be getting the 101 for Caleb Williams and 1 QB. Like that's just never going to happen, right? So what I would actually look to do is I would look to use my second on like a Drake May or something, because they have the rushing upside. Like I know it doesn't seem like it, but they have a lot of rushing. Or JJ McCarthy, you want to get one of those guys in the second? Sure, I'm fine going that route, because if they hit, they could like maybe they could tilt your favor a little bit more where someone values them, and then you could kind of package those guys off later on. But like I would much more rather do that than personally Caleb Williams. I like Caleb Williams a lot. Superflex, I think he's stud. I do wonder about like how he's going to be valued at 1 QB, so I'm a little bit more hesitant. If you want to do on Jaden Daniels, like pick 7, sure, go for it. But you could do that with Caleb Williams too. So it's kind of just pick your poison.
And just a reminder of this, discussion we had about 10 minutes ago. Here we have Breece Hall on a team that's unlikely to compete. Are we still looking to move Breece Hall this year for Hall?
Yeah. The way I look at Dynasty is anybody has a price. So if you're willing to pay that price, so set whatever iron price you're comfortable with Breece Hall. Just be like with 1 QB in particular, like the draft class dries up so much faster. Like that's the thing you have to realize. So if you're selling him for a late first, like that's a whole different ballgame than 1 QB is super flex, right? Because the quarterback installation is just decimated in this class. But getting back to your point of like the quarterbacks, if whoever you value, if it's Caleb Williams and you want to do him at 7, like I'm fine with that price. Like go for that. You could do it at 5 because you have those 3 picks, right? So it doesn't really matter 5%. But yeah, with Breece, anyone has a price. So yeah, I would sell him if anybody came to me multiple firsts, or they gave me a wide receiver plus early for like, you gave me a package that I'm comfortable with, then yeah, like I'll personally would sell him. Would you do that type of deal for Breece?
Yeah, I think I'd have to. And with the first, I'm again assuming this draft has already happened. If it has, I have to look at my pieces. A lot of those pieces at the mid to late first round are going to be depth pieces. You hope they can develop into starters. But then I want to look to see if I can accumulate 2025 picks now, even second rounders. I think a lot of early returns, people have looked at the 2025 class, absolutely love it. It makes plenty of sense with all of the running backs that are going to be available. We don't know what the quarterback class looks like, but we also have high-end athletes with NIL. Those guys are staying later and later. But I think we're going to have like a perfect storm here of like the COVID years plus the NIL deals, everybody who stayed back, and there's just going to be an influx of talent in 2025. At this time, we say this every year, so we don't totally know what 2025 is going to look like. But I'm looking to collect those 2025 picks on this roster. That's dealing Breece Hall. That's hopefully dealing Zay Flowers for first. You should be able to in 1 QB. That's looking to deal Goddard for a second, maybe even a third. And you can get out of some of these other assets. If somebody values Kendre Miller, Zach Charbonnet, I'm good to hold those guys. But if you get a good deal, like a second round pick, go ahead and move them.
Ship them out immediately.
Go ahead quickly. All right. Absolutely. All right. We have one more team here. So good luck to Austin. And this is HopeMeyers. This was yours. So I don't know if you have any other info on this team, but off the bat, it's looking decent. We have a shot here, but we need to dig more deeply into this one.
Yeah, tell me what you would do with this roster, because I'm kind of curious to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, I love, obviously, Josh Allen. Devonta Smith is a good wide receiver, too, paired with Tyreek Hill. I think that pairing is nice. We also have Drake London, of course. So that means Smith is your wide receiver 3 and Matt Stafford. So those pieces are nice. But if we're talking about a contending team, I don't see a true RB1 on this roster. I'm having issues. Deontay Johnson is on the roster, so replace him in the starting lineup with Austin Eckler. And we have Dalton Kincaid. I mean, we're pretty close here. I think what I'd probably do is look to get a true RB1 on my team. That means trading a top wide receiver to try and get that running back. I would look to move any of Deontay, Drake, or Devonta, I think would be my ideal movement. Try and get a nice RB. That way we have a stable of, a couple of RB2s here if you're hopeful of Austin Eckler, but you really need to get a top end guy. I don't know if you're going to get the likes of Gibbs or Brees or Bijan, but you could go after a CMC, especially if he's on a rebuild. You could go after a guy like Devon Achane, who can give you kind of those boom weeks. All right, these are guys that I would look to acquire now, trying not to get super old with McCaffrey, for example. But we do have a short window as well, because outside of Matt Stafford, I don't see a third quarterback here, and there's not a lot of depth outside of Deontay and, if you want to call Cortland Sutton, depth on the roster. So, I have a shot this year. I need to go all in, but I think I need to insulate with youth. I'd go after someone like an Achane. I'm trying to think of maybe like an RB, not necessarily a Najee type, because I feel like you have some Najee types here already. We need kind of a steadier, sturdier, bigger back. I can't think of one right now that's like RB7 range, maybe a Saquon, but he's on the older end. It's tough.
Yeah,
it's really tough here.
It's ETN, it's Pacheco, it's Cook, it's Walker, it's those guys. So you'd have to pick your shot, right? I really like HN. I think he's undervalued of that because he's significantly below Gibbs, and I understand why he is, but like I think they should be a lot closer together. The one thing about year two backs is they take a significant jump in volume and production. So if we're talking about the HN, if we're talking about the Gibbs, we're talking about those guys, this is how they become the high-end assets, because when they're not round one picks, like they don't have necessarily the pathway to production. It slowly comes. So with the HN, he was a round 3 pick. I know it took him a little while. It would not shock me to see him carve out a much bigger role in that offense than year 2. Like I know everyone thinks it's going to be Mostert. I don't know why we're doing this right. Wright never handled volume in his life in college. He only averaged 13 touches one season in college. That was his peak. Meanwhile, HN had 22 touches one season in college. Like they're different assets. He's a better version player. Like I know we like Wright. They traded third to get that pick from him. He's fine. He's going to take over the Mostert role. I'm much more into HN. Like I think he's just a better player in that offense. And we saw what he did on a limited touch basis. He got injured. Guess what? That happens to running backs. They get injured. So now everyone thinks he can't handle volume. And I'm like, you guys are looking at this the wrong way. So I think of those assets in that range, HN is the guy I would target. But if you want to do ETN, that's fine. He's a little bit older. It's fine.
Yeah.
I think that works because you give yourself whoever you prefer. And Hope was kind of giving me a little background. She said the last couple of years that they traded their first for pieces. So they used, let me see, came in third last year, was in the playoffs. Traded this year's 109 in pick, 409 and Michael Miles for Zay Flowers and Dalton Kincaid. So I think you knocked that one out of the ballpark. Like you gave yourself 2 assets, and that's great. 2 years ago had the 109, so she's been kind of a certified like semi-contender last years. And the 309 for Pollard and London. So you got London. I think that's a smash at the 109. Like this worked out very well for you. So you've used those picks into getting like what we talked about, younger, impactful pieces. And the London one is seeing itself through now. So yeah, if you could find yourself into like a certified RB1, I think it helps out you have enough wide receiver depth. It's fine. I do, to your point on the quarterbacks, that worries me a little bit. So if say Stafford gets injured or Allen, particularly if Allen gets injured, you'll notice this, like it will massively hit your team. Like no one's going to hurt your team worse than losing Allen. So it is kind of on the knife's edge, but like you have enough pieces where you could be a contender because you put Kincaid in the starting spot. You have Deontay Johnson. Yeah. I think that's the exact way to go with this team. Like
so here's a question. You're selling your 2025 first. You want to compete and you can get, maybe you sell your 25 first and who am I looking at? Deontay Johnson, and you can get, probably can't get him. You can get CMC. Let's say you can get CMC on this roster basically for a first and a second, right? Are you making that move and going all in even with the lack of depth here?
It's interesting with I would much rather use one of my players than the first, because what we talk about happening if injuries hit and that first becomes really early. So I would much rather use one of my pieces than the first. Like I don't like selling my first this early in the offseason because you're so far away. There's so much can happen for the 25 first. Like you're like, oh, I'm a certified contender. It might happen. What happens? Somebody falls short. Somebody gets injured. And you look at your roster and you're like, oh, crap. I don't have like 3 starters that I needed, right? So we see this with teams all the time last year. Like quarterbacks got decimated with injury last year, like with Burrow, like Lamar, even at the end of the season, like some of these guys we loved, right? So, yeah, Cousins, same thing, right? So, yeah, like you could make this move. I don't think I'm giving a first plus a second for CMC. Like I'd give a first, sure. I know the guy that has CMC is probably not going to want to sell them. The only way you're getting CMC, if they're rebuilding, like that's the only way that's really happening. If they're a contender, like why would you sell CMC, right? Like it's just he's such an advantage. Like personally, I wouldn't. I'd be like, yeah, you can kick rocks. Like I'm not selling you CMC. Like so, you'd probably have to come at them with someone like London or Flowers. Real theoretically, it's probably got to be London to get CMC off of a roster. And you want to do that on a contending team? Like I'm fine making that deal because I get it. We talk about London has the insulation. There's still question marks about him. Where you look back at a year, like maybe London falls short, CMC has another year. On the flip side, it goes like so. Like I get where that one's coming from, but yeah, like I don't mind going and getting CMC on this roster. I think he helps this roster more particularly than other rosters because the depth is not there. Pieces so like if you want to go get him on this roster, go check on the price. If it's not an extravagant price, the team's rebuilding. But yeah, like this is what you do. You go find the teams that are trying to rebuild, and you go get like the cheaper pieces. I actually think Sutton and Deontay Johnson are two of the more undervalued wide receivers for contending teams. There's no, I know people like freaking Troy Franklin, Nick, Marvin Mims. Get out of here. Sutton's the wide receiver one on that team. Like it's not, they're not going to beat Sutton out for the job. Like so, I think Deontay Johnson and Sutton are two wide receiver one on teams that like don't have much competition at all. And I think they're certified cheap contending pieces. So I think those guys help you a lot out more than other guys. So the wide receiver room's good. I like the depth. Yeah, to your point, I'm going to get running backs. And I would try to find a cheap QB3 on this roster just to give myself some insulation. Maybe that's Brissett. Who knows? Maybe he's a starting quarterback all year. I don't think that's going to happen. Like they improved that offense a lot. Like I think Drake May is going to come and take the job really soon. So I would go find a cheap QB3. Like Aaron Rodgers, one of those guys. Like see the price on a rebuilding team. Go do that.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you for joining us for the Dynasty Roster Reviews Round 2. We really appreciate you joining us here at the Fantasy Football Universe. At thefantasyfootballuniverse.com, you can find all of our rookie profiles, any sort of content we're putting out daily. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. We're on TikTok. We're on YouTube. We're everywhere. Please like and subscribe our stuff. We're trying to build this from the ground up and give you more insightful information like hopefully we provided you here. We appreciate everybody who sent in their rosters, and we're going to keep doing this next time. Any parting words for you there today, Jesse?
No, I'm sorry. I'm dying over here. So I got touched by my coffee in the throat.
So for the dying Jesse Moeller, I am Jeremy Shulman. Thank you for joining the FFU, and we will see you next time.